The morning sun cast long shadows across the pristine floors of Atlanta International Airport's private terminal as Dr. Sarah Thompson walked through the automatic glass doors. Her heels clicked confidently against the polished marble, echoing in the spacious lobby. At 42, she carried herself with the poise that came from years of breaking barriers in the pharmaceutical industry. Today was particularly important. The board meeting in Boston could determine the future of a groundbreaking cancer treatment she had been developing with her team for the past 3 years. Sarah adjusted the strap of her leather briefcase, containing the presentations that had kept her up late into the night. As she approached the private terminal's check-in area, Sarah couldn't help but smile, thinking about how far she'd come. Growing up in a modest neighborhood in Detroit, her parents had always emphasized the importance of education. Her mother, a high school science teacher, had sparked her interest in medicine, while her father, who worked 2 jobs to support the family, had taught her the value of persistence. The terminal was relatively quiet this morning, with only a few other executives and wealthy travelers preparing for their flights. Sarah noticed a young family nearby, their children playing quietly with tablets while their parents handled their travel arrangements. She checked her watch, 7:45 a.m. Perfect timing for her 8:30 a.m. departure. Her phone buzzed with a message from Dr. James Chen, her research partner in Boston. "Everything set for the presentation?" the text read. Sarah typed a quick response, assuring him she had triple-checked all the data. The research could potentially reduce chemotherapy side effects by 60%, and she wasn't about to let any details slip through the cracks. The morning light streaming through the terminal's tall windows highlighted the silver threads in her carefully twisted dreadlocks, which she had worn professionally styled for over a decade. Her charcoal gray suit was impeccably pressed, chosen specifically for its blend of authority and approachability, qualities she had mastered in her 15 years as a pharmaceutical executive. As she waited in line, Sarah reviewed her mental checklist. The presentation files were backed up on both her laptop and tablet. The preliminary trial results were organized and annotated. She had even prepared responses to potential questions about their research methodology. Thompson and Bailey Pharmaceuticals hadn't promoted her to Executive Director of Research and Development 3 years ago for nothing. A young woman behind the check-in counter called next, and Sarah stepped forward, pulling out her identification and flight documentation. The employee's name tag read Rebecca, and she offered a warm smile as she began processing Sarah's information. This was Sarah's regular Thursday routine, flying to Boston for board meetings, overseeing the progress of their multi-million-dollar research projects. While Rebecca processed her documents, Sarah's mind wandered to her daughter Melissa, now in her second year at Johns Hopkins Medical School. Following in her mother's footsteps, Melissa was determined to make her own mark in the medical field. The thought brought a subtle smile to Sarah's face. Her own mother would have been so proud to see 2 generations of Thompson women in medicine. The familiar sounds of the private terminal surrounded her. Quiet conversations, the gentle hum of air conditioning, the occasional announcement over the speakers. Sarah had earned this position through years of dedication, countless late nights in the lab, and an unwavering commitment to improving patients' lives. Her team respected her not just for her brilliant mind, but for her ability to bring out the best in others. As Rebecca handed back her documents, Sarah thought about the presentation waiting in her briefcase. The clinical trials had shown promising results, better than they'd initially hoped. If the board approved their next phase of research, they could begin larger trials within 6 months. This could mean helping thousands of cancer patients maintain a better quality of life during treatment. She checked her phone one last time before heading toward security. There was a message from her assistant confirming that her car would be waiting at Boston's Logan Airport, and another from the board secretary verifying the meeting room had been prepared with the equipment she'd requested for her presentation. Everything was falling into place. Sarah took a deep breath, feeling confident about the day ahead. With 15 years of experience presenting to boards and managing multi-million-dollar research projects, she knew how to handle high-pressure situations. What she didn't know was that in the next few minutes, she would face a very different kind of challenge, one that had nothing to do with pharmaceutical research or board presentations, and everything to do with a problem that still plagued society, even in these modern times. Sarah approached the security checkpoint of the private terminal, where a guard named Marcus Wagner stood with his arms crossed. Unlike the other staff she usually encountered here, Wagner's face showed no trace of professional courtesy. His eyes narrowed as she walked closer, and he straightened his back, making himself appear taller. ID and boarding documents, Wagner demanded, his tone sharp and unfriendly. Sarah noticed how different this was from his interaction with the businessman ahead of her, whom he had waved through with a smile just moments before. Sarah calmly presented her identification, executive credentials, and flight documentation, the same papers she had shown at check-in. Wagner snatched them from her hand and began examining each document with exaggerated scrutiny, holding them up to the light and flipping them over multiple times. "These don't look right to me," Wagner said, his voice loud enough to draw attention from nearby travelers. "Are you sure you're in the right terminal? The main passenger terminal is in the other building." Sarah maintained her composure, though she felt her heart rate increasing. "Yes, I'm certain I'm in the right place. As you can see from my documents, I'm Dr. Sarah Thompson, Executive Director at Thompson and Bailey Pharmaceuticals. I take this flight every Thursday morning." Wagner scoffed. "Anyone can print fancy titles on paper these days." He turned to his colleague. "Hey, Mike, come take a look at this." But before Mike could respond, Wagner added, "Actually, I better call this in for verification." By now, several other travelers had slowed their pace, watching the scene unfold. A young woman in business attire had taken out her phone and was quietly recording the interaction. Sarah could feel her carefully planned schedule beginning to slip away. "Sir," Sarah said firmly, maintaining eye contact, "I've shown you my government-issued ID, my company credentials, and my flight documentation, all of which were just verified at the check-in counter. What specific concern do you have about their authenticity?" Wagner's face reddened. "Look, I'm just doing my job. We have protocols to follow." Yet Sarah had never seen these protocols applied to other executives in her many Thursday morning flights. She reached into her briefcase and pulled out her medical research credentials and a recent corporate magazine featuring her on the cover. "Perhaps these additional forms of identification will help clear up any confusion," she said, her voice steady despite the frustration building inside her. Wagner barely glanced at the new documents. Instead, he picked up his phone and began dialing, turning his back to Sarah. "Yeah, I'm going to need verification on a passenger. Claims to be some kind of executive. No, I don't buy it." Sarah checked her watch, 8:10 a.m. Her flight was scheduled to leave in 20 minutes, and she still needed to get through security and reach the gate. The board meeting in Boston couldn't start without her presentation of the clinical trials. Other passengers moving through security were now openly staring. Some shook their heads in disapproval of Wagner's behavior, while others whispered among themselves. A flight crew member passing by slowed down, frowning at the scene. "Sir," Sarah tried again, "I understand you're doing your job, but I have a critically important board meeting this morning. Every minute of delay puts that at risk. Could you please explain specifically what additional verification you need?" Wagner turned back to her, his expression hard. "Maybe you don't understand how things work here. This is a private terminal. We can't just let anyone walk through claiming to be an executive." The emphasis he put on the word anyone made his meaning clear. Sarah felt a familiar weight in her chest, the same one she'd carried through medical school, through her early career, through countless moments when her abilities and belongings were questioned simply because of her appearance. But before she could respond, a sharp voice cut through the tension. "What seems to be the problem here?" Sarah turned to see Jennifer Martinez, the terminal supervisor, walking briskly toward them. Her face showed concern as she took in the scene. Wagner still holding Sarah's documents, the small crowd of onlookers, and the phone recordings that had begun to capture this all-too-familiar scenario. The next few moments would determine not just whether Sarah made her flight, but whether this would become yet another quiet incident of discrimination or a moment of accountability and change. Jennifer Martinez's arrival changed the energy in the terminal immediately. The supervisor's dark eyes quickly assessed the situation, taking in the scattered documents on the counter, Wagner's defensive posture, and Sarah's controlled but tense expression. "Dr. Thompson?" Martinez said, recognition clear in her voice. "I've seen you come through here every Thursday for the past 2 years." She turned to Wagner, her professional smile fading. "Is there a problem with her documentation, Officer Wagner?" Wagner shifted uncomfortably, but didn't back down. "I'm conducting a standard security check. The documents need verification." He held up Sarah's ID as if it proved his point. Martinez stepped closer, her heels clicking against the floor. I don't recall seeing you conduct such thorough standard checks on other executives this morning. Her voice was calm, but carried an edge of authority. In fact, I watched you wave through 3 other passengers just minutes ago. More people had gathered around the scene. A businessman in an expensive suit spoke up from the small crowd. I walked through 5 minutes ago. He barely glanced at my ID. Others nodded in agreement, and the number of phones recording the incident had multiplied. Sarah checked her watch again, 8:15 a.m. The situation was now seriously threatening her schedule. Ms. Martinez, she said, maintaining her professional tone, I have a crucial board meeting in Boston this morning. Our research team is presenting vital clinical trial results. Wagner interrupted, his face reddening further. Look, I don't care what kind of meeting she claims to have. We can't just let people through without proper verification. For all I know, those documents could be fake. A young flight attendant who had been watching stepped forward. I've served Dr. Thompson on multiple flights. She's one of our regular passengers. Other staff members nodded in agreement, their faces showing disapproval of Wagner's behavior. Martinez picked up Sarah's corporate magazine from the counter, showing the cover story featuring Dr. Thompson's breakthrough research in cancer treatment. Officer Wagner, would you care to explain how this magazine article from 3 months ago could be fake? Or perhaps the multiple staff members recognizing Dr. Thompson are all mistaken. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. Other travelers had stopped completely, watching the scene unfold. Some were shaking their heads in disgust at Wagner's behavior, while others were openly expressing their support for Sarah. Wagner's face had turned a deep shade of red. I'm following security protocols, he began, but Martinez cut him off. No, Officer Wagner, you are not following protocols. You are creating unnecessary delays and showing clear bias in your application of security procedures. Martinez's voice was firm and professional, but her disapproval was evident. This is unacceptable behavior in our terminal. Sarah spoke up again, her voice steady despite the situation. I understand the importance of security procedures, Ms. Martinez. However, Officer Wagner has not provided any legitimate reason for this extended verification process. I've shown multiple forms of identification, including government-issued ID, corporate credentials, and additional documentation. I'm a regular passenger at this terminal, recognized by staff, yet I'm being treated as suspicious. A senior flight crew member approached Martinez and spoke quietly in her ear. Martinez nodded and turned to Sarah. Dr. Thompson, I'm having your luggage expedited through security now. We'll ensure you make your flight. She then focused her attention on Wagner. Officer Wagner, please step aside. You're relieved of duty for the remainder of your shift, pending review. Wagner's face showed a mix of anger and defiance. You can't do that. I have the authority to. Your authority does not extend to discriminatory practices, Martinez stated firmly. Security camera footage and multiple witness recordings will be reviewed. Please report to my office after you've been relieved by the next shift officer. The crowd of onlookers had grown larger, and several people applauded Martinez's decision. Sarah could hear whispers of approval and see nods of satisfaction among the witnesses. Some were still recording, ensuring the entire interaction was documented. As a new security officer quickly took Wagner's place and began processing Sarah's documents with professional courtesy, the tension in the air slowly began to dissipate. But this incident was far from over. It was clear from the determined look on Martinez's face and the numerous recordings that had captured the scene that there would be consequences for Wagner's actions. Sarah glanced at her watch one final time, 8:20 a.m. With Martinez's intervention, she might still make her flight, but the morning's events had sparked something larger than her delayed schedule. This incident would not be swept under the rug like so many before it. The next 15 minutes in the private terminal moved with incredible speed and efficiency. Jennifer Martinez transformed from supervisor to commander, orchestrating a team response that showed exactly why she held her position. Her voice carried across the terminal as she issued clear, precise instructions to her staff. Lisa, please escort Dr. Thompson through priority security, Martinez directed a senior staff member. James, notify the flight crew that Dr. Thompson is en route. Michael, gather all witness information and begin taking statements. Each command was met with immediate action, her team moving with practiced precision. Sarah watched as the previously tense situation shifted into a coordinated response. The new security officer, a woman named Patricia Wilson, processed her documents with swift professionalism. "I apologize for your experience, Dr. Thompson," Officer Wilson said quietly as she completed the security check. "This isn't what we stand for here." Meanwhile, Wagner stood to the side, his security badge already removed and held loosely in his hand. His earlier bravado had deflated, replaced by a dawning realization of the seriousness of his actions. Several passengers who had witnessed the incident were already providing their contact information to Michael, some even forwarding their video recordings on the spot. A distinguished-looking man in his 60s stepped forward from the crowd. "I'm Richard Bennett, member of the Airport Authority Board," he introduced himself to Martinez. "I witnessed the entire incident. This kind of behavior is completely unacceptable in our facilities. I'll be calling an emergency meeting this afternoon." Martinez nodded gratefully. "Thank you, Mr. Bennett. We'll have a complete incident report ready within the hour." She turned to her assistant. "Make sure Mr. Bennett receives a copy of all documentation, including the security camera footage." The terminal's atmosphere had completely changed. Where there had been tension and confrontation, there was now purposeful activity. Several airline staff members who knew Sarah from her regular flights came forward to offer support and assistance. A flight attendant brought her a fresh cup of coffee, exactly how she liked it, having served her so many Thursday mornings before. "Your presentation materials, Dr. Thompson," Lisa said, returning with Sarah's briefcase that had been quickly but thoroughly screened. "Everything's been checked and secured. Your garment bag is being delivered directly to the aircraft." Martinez approached Sarah again, her clipboard in hand. "Dr. Thompson, I want to personally assure you that this incident will be thoroughly investigated. We're documenting everything, and we'll need your statement when you return from Boston. Would you be willing to speak with our compliance team?" Sarah nodded, checking her phone where several messages from her team in Boston had accumulated. "Yes, of course. I'll make myself available whenever needed." She appreciated how Martinez was handling the situation, not just with apologies, but with concrete action. The young woman who had first started recording the incident approached them. "Dr. Thompson, I'm Angela Chen from the Atlanta Business Journal. Would you be willing to comment on what happened here this morning?" She held up her press credentials along with her phone. Before Sarah could respond, Martinez stepped in smoothly. "Ms. Chen will be issuing a formal statement shortly. However, our priority right now is ensuring Dr. Thompson makes her flight." Her tone was polite but firm, creating a professional buffer that Sarah appreciated. The terminal's large clock showed 8:25 a.m. "Your flight crew is ready, Dr. Thompson," James announced, returning from his call to the plane. "They're holding for your arrival." As Sarah gathered her belongings, she noticed how many people were still watching, their faces showing support and concern. The incident had revealed both the worst and best of human nature. Wagner's discrimination countered by the immediate response of dozens of witnesses and professionals who refused to let it stand. Martinez walked with Sarah toward the gate, their heels clicking in unison against the marble floor. "We will make this right," Martinez assured her quietly. "What happened here today, it won't be ignored or minimized." Sarah turned to her. "Thank you, Ms. Martinez. Your response made a difference." She paused, then added, "You know, in my field, we talk about critical intervention points, moments where immediate action can change the entire outcome. What you did here today, that was a critical intervention." As they reached the gate, Sarah could see her familiar flight crew waiting. Beyond the window, the private jet climbed smoothly through the morning sky as Sarah finally allowed herself to relax in her leather seat. Her phone buzzed with a series of incoming messages now that she was able to receive them. The first was from Jennifer Martinez, sent just minutes after her takeoff. "Dr. Thompson, I want to update you on immediate actions taken," the message read. "Officer Wagner has been placed on immediate administrative leave. Airport Authority Board is convening an emergency session this afternoon. We will have a full investigation report ready by your return next week." Sarah took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the morning's events. The flight attendant, Mary, who had served her many times before, approached with a fresh cup of coffee. "Dr. Thompson, I heard what happened in the terminal. Mary said softly. The entire crew is deeply sorry you experienced that. Opening her laptop, Sarah saw an email from Richard Bennett, the Airport Authority board member who had witnessed the incident. The subject line read, "Immediate action required, terminal security incident." The email detailed plans for a complete review of security protocols and staff training procedures. Back in the terminal, Martinez was dealing with the aftermath. She stood in the security office, reviewing the footage from multiple cameras that had captured the entire incident. The evidence was clear and damning. On one screen, she could see Wagner waving through other executives with barely a glance at their credentials. On another, his confrontational behavior toward Dr. Thompson was clearly visible. Ms. Martinez, her assistant, called from the doorway. "The media is requesting comments." Channel 4 and the Atlanta Daily have both called, and social media is already picking up the story. Some of the passengers' videos are starting to circulate online. Martinez nodded, having expected this. "Contact corporate communications immediately. We need to be transparent about this. Tell them I want our statement to be clear. We have zero tolerance for discriminatory behavior, and we're taking immediate corrective action." In another part of the terminal, Michael was still collecting witness statements. The young businessman who had recorded the incident was showing him the video. "Look here," he pointed out. "You can clearly see how Officer Wagner's behavior changed when Dr. Thompson approached. I have another video from 10 minutes earlier showing how he treated other passengers." The terminal's legal team had already been assembled in a conference room, reviewing the growing stack of evidence. Wagner sat in another room, writing his incident report under supervision. His hands shook slightly as he tried to explain his actions, knowing that multiple videos and witnesses had captured the truth. Sarah's phone buzzed again. This time it was from Dr. James Chen in Boston. "Sarah, word of the incident has reached us here. The board is appalled. They've added an agenda item to discuss company-wide travel security protocols and ensuring our executives' safety and dignity." Looking out the plane window at the clouds below, Sarah thought about all the other people who might have faced similar discrimination but didn't have the support system she had. Her position as an executive, the presence of witnesses, and Martinez's immediate response had helped address the situation. But how many others had suffered in silence? She began typing a response to Martinez's message. "Thank you for your swift action this morning. I would like to be involved in any discussions about improving security protocols and training. Perhaps this incident can lead to positive changes." Meanwhile, in the terminal's administrative offices, Martinez was meeting with her senior staff. "I want a complete audit of all security interactions for the past month," she instructed. "Review every complaint, every incident report. If there's a pattern of behavior, we need to know." The airport's HR director spoke up. "We should also review our hiring and training procedures. How did someone with these biases make it through our screening process?" As the morning progressed, the incident was becoming a catalyst for broader changes. The airport authority's preliminary statement emphasized their commitment to addressing not just this single incident, but the systemic issues it revealed. Sarah's phone lit up with another message, this time from her daughter Melissa. "Mom, I just heard what happened. Are you okay? I'm so proud of how you handled it. You're showing everyone that silence isn't the answer." Looking at her presentation materials for the Boston meeting, Sarah realized that while she would be discussing medical breakthroughs today, she had also become part of another important change, one that might help prevent others from facing the same discrimination she had experienced this morning. 1 week after the incident, the airport's main conference room was filled with serious faces. The investigation team had gathered substantial evidence, and today they would present their findings. Jennifer Martinez sat at the head of the table, surrounded by airport officials, security supervisors, and representatives from the Airport Authority Board. "Let's begin with the security footage analysis," said David Cooper, the head of internal investigations. He clicked a button, and a large screen came to life. Split-screen footage showed Wagner's interactions with different passengers over the past month. The contrast was striking. The team had compiled data showing that Wagner spent an average of 30 seconds checking credentials for most executives, but his interactions with minority passengers often stretched to 5 minutes or longer. The pattern was clear and undeniable. "We've interviewed 47 witnesses from the incident involving Dr. Thompson," Cooper continued, flipping through his report. Additionally, our review of past complaints has revealed 12 similar incidents over the past 6 months that weren't properly addressed. Richard Bennett, the Airport Authority board member who had witnessed the incident, leaned forward. How did these previous complaints slip through our system? His question hung heavy in the air. Martinez spoke up. We've identified gaps in our reporting structure. Complaints were filed, but they were often classified as routine security delays rather than potential discrimination cases. She passed out a document outlining the flaws in their current system. In another room down the hall, Dr. Sarah Thompson sat with her company's legal team. After her successful board meeting in Boston, she had returned to Atlanta to participate in the investigation. Her company, Thompson and Bailey Pharmaceuticals, was taking an active role in addressing the situation. Dr. Thompson, said Grace Williams, the company's chief legal officer, your experience has highlighted a serious issue affecting corporate travelers. We're preparing recommendations for all major airports where our executives frequently travel. Sarah nodded, reviewing the document in front of her. It's not just about me, she said. Every day, professionals face similar discrimination. We need systematic changes to prevent this from happening to anyone else. Back in the conference room, the investigation team moved on to Wagner's employment history. His personnel file revealed previous incidents that had been dismissed with simple warnings. His supervisor had recently retired, and crucial documentation had been overlooked during the transition. We've also reviewed our training procedures, said Maria Sanchez, the head of HR. Our current anti-bias training is clearly inadequate. We've consulted with diversity experts to develop a more comprehensive program. The investigation had expanded beyond Wagner's actions. Every level of airport security operations was under scrutiny. The team discovered outdated policies, insufficient oversight, and a lack of clear procedures for reporting discrimination. Outside the airport, the incident had gained attention. Civil rights organizations had reached out, offering to assist in developing new guidelines. Other airports across the country were watching closely, aware that they might face similar issues. We've received responses from 23 major airports, Cooper reported. They're all requesting copies of our new protocols once they're developed. This incident could lead to industry-wide changes. Sarah's phone buzzed with a message from Martinez. Would you be willing to review our proposed changes before we finalize them? Your perspective would be valuable. Sarah quickly typed her agreement. The investigation team had assembled a timeline of events, starting from the moment Sarah entered the terminal. Every witness statement, every video clip, every security camera angle had been analyzed. The evidence painted a clear picture of discriminatory behavior. Wagner's actions violated 6 different airport policies and 2 federal regulations, the legal team reported. His behavior showed clear bias and created an unsafe and hostile environment for travelers. In the break room, airport staff discussed the changes already taking place. New supervisors have been assigned to every security checkpoint. Mandatory daily briefings now included specific examples of inappropriate behavior and proper responses. Sarah met with Martinez after the main investigation meeting. We're implementing immediate changes, Martinez explained. Every security officer will be required to wear body cameras. We're installing additional security cameras with better audio capability. Each checkpoint will have a supervisor present at all times. The investigation had revealed more than just one officer's misconduct. It had exposed systemic problems that needed addressing, but it had also shown how quickly positive change could happen when leaders took decisive action. As Sarah prepared to leave the airport that evening, she saw new signs being installed at every security checkpoint. Report any concerns immediately. Your safety and dignity matter. It was a small change, but it represented something bigger, an acknowledgement that security and respect could, and should, go hand in hand. 2 weeks after the incident, the Airport Authority Board called a special meeting to announce their decisions. The large conference room was packed with airport staff, media representatives, and civil rights observers. The tension in the air was palpable as Richard Bennett approached the podium. After a thorough investigation, Bennett began, his voice firm and clear, we have reached several decisions regarding the incident involving Dr. Sarah Thompson and Officer Marcus Wagner. He paused, looking directly at the assembled cameras. First, Officer Wagner's employment has been terminated, effective immediately. His actions violated multiple airport policies, federal regulations, and basic human dignity. The announcement caused a slight stir in the room, though few were surprised given the evidence. Sarah sat in the front row, accompanied by Jennifer Martinez and her company's legal team. She maintained her usual professional composure, though inside she felt a mix of emotions. This wasn't about one person losing their job, it was about changing a system. Bennett continued, however, terminating one employee does not address the underlying issues. Therefore, we are implementing comprehensive changes throughout our airport security system. He gestured to his assistant, who began distributing detailed packets to the attendees. The changes were substantial. Every security checkpoint would now have a supervisor present during all shifts. Body cameras would become mandatory for all security personnel. New security cameras with audio recording capabilities were being installed throughout the terminals. We're also introducing a complete overhaul of our training programs, Martinez stepped up to explain. Every security officer will undergo enhanced anti-bias training developed in partnership with civil rights experts and diversity specialists. This training will be mandatory and repeated annually. The airport's HR director then announced new hiring procedures. We're implementing more thorough background checks and psychological evaluations for all security personnel. Additionally, we're creating a diverse hiring committee to ensure fair and unbiased selection processes. In the audience, other airport officials from around the country took notes. The incident had caught national attention, and many airports were looking to implement similar changes. Sarah's experience had become a catalyst for industry-wide improvement. Furthermore, Bennett continued, we're establishing an independent oversight committee. He introduced a diverse group of community leaders, civil rights attorneys, and aviation security experts who would monitor the implementation of these changes. Sarah's phone buzzed quietly, a message from her daughter Melissa. Mom, watching the live stream. These changes will help so many people. You turned something horrible into real progress. Sarah smiled softly, thinking how this would affect future generations. The presentation moved on to specific policy changes. A new reporting system would make it easier for passengers to file complaints about discriminatory treatment. These complaints would go directly to the Oversight Committee, bypassing potential bureaucratic bottlenecks. We're also creating a passenger advocacy office, Martinez announced. This office will be staffed 24/7 to address any concerns immediately. No passenger should ever feel powerless or unsupported in our airport. Thompson and Bailey Pharmaceuticals representatives then took the podium. They announced their company would fund research into airport security bias and help develop training programs for other airports. Sarah's experience would help protect countless other travelers. The media questions began, and Sarah watched as airport officials answered with transparency and commitment. There was no defensiveness, no attempts to minimize what had happened. Instead, there was a clear acknowledgement of past failures and a strong commitment to change. Dr. Thompson, a reporter called out, "Do you think these changes are sufficient?" 6 months after the incident, Sarah Thompson stood at the podium in the airport's main conference center. The room was filled with airport executives, security personnel, and civil rights leaders from across the country. They had gathered for the first National Airport Security and Inclusion Conference, an event that grew from the changes sparked by her experience. When I walked into this airport 6 months ago, Sarah began, I was focused on my board meeting in Boston. I never expected to become part of a movement for change. She looked around the room, noting how different the atmosphere felt from that tense morning. The changes were visible everywhere. New security checkpoints had been redesigned with better lighting and cameras. Security officers wore body cameras as standard equipment. But the most significant changes weren't physical. They were in the attitudes and procedures that governed the airport's daily operations. Jennifer Martinez, recently promoted to Director of Airport Security Operations, presented the statistics from the past 6 months. Passenger complaints about discriminatory treatment have dropped by 87%, she reported. Our new training programs have been adopted by 12 other major airports, and 20 more are in the process of implementing them. In the audience, Sarah's daughter Melissa sat with pride. Now in her final year of medical school, she had helped develop a section of the training program that addressed unconscious bias in professional settings. The mother-daughter team had turned a negative experience into a teaching opportunity. We trained over 5,000 security personnel nationwide using our new protocols, Martinez continued. The Oversight Committee has reviewed more than 200 cases, ensuring that every complaint receives proper attention. The conference center screen showed photos of the new changes. Security checkpoints now had diverse teams of officers. Signs in multiple languages informed passengers of their rights and the reporting procedures. A 24-hour advocacy office had handled hundreds of cases, resolving most issues before they could escalate. Richard Bennett, who had witnessed the original incident, now headed a national committee on airport security reform. What happened here became a template for airports across the country, he explained. We've shown that security and respect are not mutually exclusive. Sarah's company, Thompson and Bailey Pharmaceuticals, had also made changes. They now provided all their traveling executives with special training on handling discrimination and had developed partnerships with airports to improve security protocols. Other companies had followed their lead. The young journalist who had first recorded the incident, Angela Chen, was now writing a book about the transformation in airport security practices. Dr. Thompson's experience opened a door, she told the audience. But it was the response of leaders like Ms. Martinez that turned this incident into lasting change. During a break in the conference, Sarah walked through the terminal where the incident had occurred. The space felt different now. Security officers greeted passengers with professional courtesy. A diverse team of supervisors monitored operations. The tense atmosphere of 6 months ago had been replaced by efficient, respectful security procedures. Dr. Thompson, a young security officer, approached her. I just completed my training last week. Your case study was part of our lessons. It helped us understand the importance of treating every passenger with dignity. Later that afternoon, Sarah participated in a panel discussion with security experts and civil rights advocates. They discussed how the changes had improved both security effectiveness and passenger experience. The data showed that treating passengers with respect actually made security procedures more efficient. The most important change, Sarah told the panel, is that people now feel empowered to speak up. Every passenger knows they have the right to be treated with dignity, and they know there's a system in place to support them. As the conference drew to a close, Martinez shared plans for the future. The airport would host annual reviews of their security procedures, continuously updating them based on feedback and experience. The Oversight Committee would expand its role, working with more airports nationwide. Sarah's phone buzzed with a message from her research team in Boston. Their cancer treatment trials were showing promising results. Life had moved forward, but the changes she helped create would continue to affect travelers for years to come. Looking out the conference center's windows at the planes taking off and landing, Sarah reflected on how one morning had sparked such significant change. It hadn't been easy, but the support of people like Martinez, Bennett, and countless others had turned a moment of discrimination into an opportunity for progress. Sometimes, she said in her closing remarks, the most important changes come from standing up and saying, this isn't right. But the real victory comes when an entire community stands up and says, we can do better. That's what happened here, and that's what continues to happen every day in airports across the country.